Hello and welcome back to another episode of our Mega-lo-Mania in Unreal Engine. So about a few days ago, unfortunately wasn't able to get a chance to stream both Friday and Saturday, so here we are. But the last thing that we managed to do was get our construction job effectively working. One thing that I didn't demonstrate at the time was that it actually works across all four players, as we really would want to expect from it. So we can begin the job on these two. If I get the right place. I have to check. I think maybe the cursor is a bit off. But can't seem to get that one. Let's try this one. I said that it worked, but for some reason that button is not working. Maybe it can't do it at the same time. But anyway, so we'll just go through it with this one. About 30 people gets it done in a couple of seconds. So we can see that this gets built and it shows up on all the players. It doesn't look like the other players can begin the construction, unfortunately. So when I said that it works across the players, I meant one person can build it and everybody can see that they have. Not quite what we're looking for. So I'm going to try and fix up that. It shouldn't be too difficult. Just got to find out where it doesn't go. So we'll put... is this one? Yeah, we'll put... oh, actually, I think perhaps the issue was something that I hadn't... I think I did the problem before. Yeah, when I use page up and page down to select a sector for the other players, because player 1 is the first sector, page down doesn't go anywhere, so we're still possessed that sector, we're still in control of that sector, but all the other players don't have that. We have to go back up the list until we find the right sector that we actually are in control of, and now we can build the mine correctly. So I still have to get that initial perspective sorted for the players so that they can see their sector correctly. As we could see, the initial camera isn't in the right place. It's not actually looking at the sector that we want it to, which is a bit frustrating, but as we can see, so all the players can actually build. It's just the only thing that doesn't represent very well is whether you're looking at a sector that you own or not. So that's actually done by currently our... does our HUD do it? Yeah, our HUD does it. So it gets the player controller and it creates that widget. I don't think there's a function on the controller for whether something should be possessed or not, but let's see if we can try and connect that up. So what we really want is when the player possesses a sector, which is done here, we also want to tell the HUD that it should update, and we want to tell it for the right player. So we can create a custom event, and we'll call that sector changed, and we'll replicate that to the owning client. And now in our player controller, when we possess a pawn, we can get the HUD from the player controller. Where is our... where are we? Oh, sorry, we're in the player controller, so we can get the HUD. Oh, HUD. I think that macro that we have, oh yeah, get, I think that one was one that I created for getting the particular HUD and casting it, but I don't think that's the HUD we're using at the moment. We're using the test sector HUD, so I don't want to use that particular one. But we do need to cast it to the test sector HUD. And now we want to, on that, call sector changed. And this replication part basically will mean that it will get executed on the client for that player. And now we can say so what we could do is pass in here a sector. That's going to be one of our T sector actors. And we'll do is valid. If we have got a sector, then we'll display the appropriate yeah. We'll display the appropriate widget. If we haven't, we want to empty the viewport. We want to remove the widget. See how we can do that. I guess that one will work. So rather than the widget being created to start with, we create it after we possess. But what we want to be able to do is do that also if we don't possess it. So we set the viewport there. If there's a castle and it's ours, so those two things. I think because we need to know it's this one. Because we need to know whether there is a castle and we own it, it would be easier to do both checks like that as kind of pure functions, and then we can AND the appropriate Boolean values together, so we have that one Boolean value to check. Somewhat a bit awkwardly placed, but that'll do for now. And that means we can call the function again on the false case, and we just simply don't pass in a sector there, whereas if we are possessing it, we can pass a sector in there. Except it wants one. Hello, Elite Tech Workshop. Not sure if you're still viewing, but working on Mega-lo-Mania in Unreal Engine. Mega-lo-Mania being a game from the 90s, effectively a strategy game. So I'm trying to use, at the moment, trying to use the original graphics to make it in Unreal Engine, somewhat as a learning experience, somewhat as a kind of a game that I enjoy playing, and it'd be good to to play it properly without using DOSBox, I suppose. But yeah, so I've been working on it for quite some time now, and there's still plenty to do. So because I've said the event should accept a sector, the call from the player controller doesn't like the fact that it's not there. I think the only nice way, because we need to know whether it's our sector. I suppose actually it's not 100% true. We need to know the sector regardless whether it's ours or not. So we'll tie that up to both sets. Just move that up so we can see that it works differently. And what we will do is pass in another Boolean value to say whether we own it or not. And that comes from there. Now we can figure out whether we own it or not by basically doing this same check within the sector, but yeah, I suppose that's actually what we're doing here, isn't it? What we could do then, maybe slightly nicer, is do a function. Yeah, a function. So we can just have a function within the sector. Can take that code, put it in here, yeah, so I remember now why I did the is valid differently. If we do it like that, it checks whether it's valid or not, which is fine, but it equally at the same time gets the owner, and we end up with a warning, because if it's not valid then there won't be an owner. So I have to do the is valid the long way, but since it's in a function now, it's not going to make any difference. We're in a function, so we'll have a yeah, so that should do our kind of are we an owner check for our sector. I think we could do a literal bool instead. No, because we can't. Just seeing if there's a way we can wire this up differently without the variable. So it should really be this way round, at least. So it's false by default, true if it's valid. Yeah, that's still going to cause the get owner thing to run. So if we do it like that, so now we basically just trying to avoid calling the owner for the castle if it's not valid. To do that we've had to put this branch in, so if it is valid it goes to the branch actually does that owner check. If that's true then it sets valid to true and it returns that. If it's false it just goes straight to return, or if it's invalid it goes straight to return. In both cases return the default value of valid, which is false. So that should be what we're after in that case. So now we can go back to our player controller. Got that is owner check. And this is a player controller. So we need to just put that to the side. Okay, so that should tie everything up nicely. So we don't actually want to just blanketly remove all the widgets. We'd actually want to change the widget or display some widgets, some parts of it or others, but we'll just see if that works. Well, the UI doesn't show up, but it doesn't turn up either when it should. So we'll just put this back down to a single player. Okay, we're not getting to the sector change. Stop there instead. See if there's a problem in here. So we've got the player controller. We know that the player controller is the owner of one of them at least. So that's true. We possess that. So maybe the I guess we need to make sure that we're showing the right HUD. We must be, because we were showing the yeah, we're showing that before. Oh, too many. So far as I can tell, we never come into that. Yeah, we never go into that function, so while we do actually get to calling sector change, it doesn't execute it. Why might that be? Select the HUD, so the dynamic cast for the HUD doesn't work here. But our game mode, yeah, our game mode says that it should use the test sector HUD, which is the one we're trying to use, the one we're trying to convert to. So by the look of the logs, that event begin play for the HUD is actually called just after we try and possess, which shouldn't be. It will stop it working the first time, but it shouldn't stop it happening the next time. Ah, right, yeah, I get it. This is executing on the server, it doesn't actually have a player. We need to get back to the player. Forgot about that bit. Yeah, so we call this view sector. I think if let's just try then. That has to be done up here somewhere else. So we can call the sector changed event on the player controller and reliably replicate it to the player controller. But because the event didn't come from the HUD, we can't send it back to the HUD. So this should work instead. It doesn't need to be an event now. In our HUD, where's our HUD gone? There we go. See if that works any better. Yeah, so at least in the function now. So in a sector. That event has a sector. That one doesn't, so it didn't wire it up. Oops. So that should be that. Now hopefully I'll have all the information. Put the breakpoint there instead. Current value for owner is true, but the current value for sector is null. Not quite right. Yep, so the is valid part is fine. We really, if it's not valid, if the sector's not valid, we don't care. Well, it's not, and it's never going to be invalid now. We're always looking at a sector. What we do care about is whether it's ours or not. So that should at least make the UI show and hide depending on. There we go. So we don't want it to completely hide. We want to keep the tech level and the island name. That's what we use in the future, but that's kind of not critical at this point. It's fairly easy to kind of work with that moving forwards. So so we're actually getting a load of spam in the logs for accessing a job that doesn't exist, so I'm going to try and find out where that is. It's probably within the widget itself. Yeah, so I think the problem is the use of the array element. Not obviously to the break construction here, but more to that one there. Because what it's doing is trying to get that element even when the array index is 0. Or perhaps it even includes using the array index in that context as well, but we'll see. Yeah, so that removes all the spam. The problem is we do actually want to provide the job back if a job exists from this function, but only if it exists instead of under all circumstances. So I think what we could do have job index for now. And as an integer. So basically we've said that if the name matches, then we set the job index, the job found, but instead of setting that, we'll set our job index instead. And then once we've either break out of that loop or completed that loop, our job index will be -1. Is greater than or equal to So that's still going to probably do that, isn't it? Because it's going to still going to access the array at that given index if when that's called. So maybe the answer is we actually have to store the job itself. I think one of the issues we had was that find existing job returns a construction job structure, and the structure is copied, so we can't modify the job without using the index, which is why we return the index. So I think really we just need to set both values. Kind of implies that a macro would have an advantage in the fact that we could have multiple outputs. So we'd want to do pretty much exactly the same in terms of the loop. We could have multiple outputs, but we can't store. Probably don't need to store though if we're not using let's see what a macro would look like. Yeah, I still don't think that's going to work, because it basically, with this, when this is called, it tries to get from the array element an array index, or tries to get the array element for that index, which would be 0. So the only way I can think of doing it is actually storing the job as a local variable, storing the index as we are here, so they're only set when we find it, and then returning them here. So that basically says give us a job, the job index, and if the job index is greater than or equal to 0, we say that we found it. So that should be what we want. And that's done in the sector widget. Yeah, so in this case, find existing job, it doesn't actually modify the job anyway, but does use that Boolean value and the job itself. But that should mean that we should be warning free, and hopefully the job will still work. Yep, it's about right. So if we go off and on. Yep. Okay. So the job for construction's working as we want now. So the next thing that we could do in terms of jobs, or in terms of stuff the sector needs to do to make it work, is gathering resources. Now we've put the resources up there. Just reorder this. Spawn button down the bottom. We've put the resources up here in this vertical box. This one here for the resources. I'm going to separate that out so that we can effectively assign miners to each of those different resources. Now again, we're just going to assume there's always going to be 4. We'll deal with how they should show up or whether they should show up a bit later on. So we'll just do a vertical box. Get them on the right parent. Yep. Yeah, so in this case we're going to have quite a lot of duplication, and that's probably just going to make it a bit tedious. So I'm going to create a new widget. So we'll use the task terminology that we did before, and we just need to. I'll leave it as a leave it as a canvas panel. So in this case we want an image for the task, we want the plus and the minus buttons, the text, time, all that stuff. I think it's just all of that. There we go, copied it across. So we'll blank the image, so we're not giving anything away. What we want to do is make sure that that's always got some size to it. Nope, 100's too big. There we go. So it doesn't go small and weird like it did before. So I think that's all we want from that, but we'll drop in another horizontal box. We do that so that we can align it to the bottom. Maybe the bottom's better. No. But either way, now we've put it in a box itself, we've kind of got control of changing its height. But I think centered actually makes it look best. Okay, so in our test sector widget where we're handling these buttons, let's find where we did that. Yeah, so we added on-click events for the buttons themselves, and we just call that assign builders with a task name. So that went to the player controller, didn't it? So the basic concept that we have here will apply to our basic task. Shame we can't get that text to be a bit more centered. But anyway. Okay, so what we want is in the graph a new variable. So first we need the kind of two inputs. We'll call that the task sprite, not task image sprite, which will be a paper 2D, paper sprite even. And there's a button variable, task name. Let's go with the prefixes since that is what it is. So we'll expose them on spawn, make it instance editable, and we'll put these into the constructor category. Seems good enough. There we go. Name and sprite. So when this is constructed, we want to take the sprite and set it on our image. So we just make these or generic names. Just as the timer image. It's just the remaining time and task image. So this is going to be very similar to the task we created in the other case. I mean, in terms of the research task that we did, it's probably almost going to be the same. But we'll see how it goes first with how this is. So when this widget gets created, we just want to set the sprite first thing we do. Jump over to the so we take out our resource 1. We can take out our horizontal boxes, take out all the resources. and then we can drop in our basic task. And just kind of to verify that the sprite bit works, we can just select a sprite. Oops. But for now we'll leave it off. I think we should set that to 16 by 16. That means we keep that size in there. Nope, that didn't help. Just resets it because the sprite's not set. No, it doesn't matter. We don't need to see it. So we need 4 basic sprites for our resources. We could use a basic sprite for our construction, and we'll have 3 of those. Okay, we'll leave the original one in place, but we'll make some others underneath it. So so these are obviously going to be hard-coded tasks. In the actual UI, they would be more dynamically added. So yeah, it's displaying the resources, so don't need anything after that section, so it's not going to work anyway. Let's see what that looks like. Not good. Yeah, so we've taken out all the resources, so all that can go. So in the event pre-construct, we can just tie up the code we need for the events. So this basic task would be mine resource 1. I think actually the game, I think almost every sector has a kind of hand gatherable resource, not one that you have to mine, but there's also the chance that a sector may have no resources at all, either because they've all been used or some variation thereof, so the resources do have to be added dynamically. Don't know why it keeps making my things disappear. Quite frustrating. Not that one, that one. So that would be construct mine. Yeah, so he'll fall off the bottom. So what we can do is, thought that might be the case. take mining and we'll wrap it in a, take the vertical box actually, scroll box. Oh, we converted it to a scroll box, but that should be okay. See what that looks like. Okay, now we need to say no, now they're completely gone. Just trying to tell how big it can be, but I think the problem is it's as big as it needs to be because of how big the screen is. So our editor window is only 640 high. So I thought the canvas box would have shrunk and thus the scroll box would have been able to scroll, but it depends perhaps where the scroll box is. Yeah, so this vertical box here apparently isn't very tall. Okay, that's better. Now that one has to be scroll, and that one. Don't know if placing with the scroll box is better. Let's try that. Still not getting any smaller. Maybe we need to wrap it with a size box and make its height, I don't know, 50. Does that work? Yes. I mean, there's some complications, but it kind of works. Any better? We can only see 2 for some reason, despite there should be 4 there. Maybe that needs to be a vertical box, kind of as we had before. We still only see 2 in that box. So the bottom one works okay. We see all 4 items. Top one doesn't seem to be okay because we seem to struggle to fit them all in. The numbers are a bit off, that's 1. Don't really understand why one of them's completely not working. It looks okay in the editor, but it doesn't look okay when we play. Does seem to act weirdly anyway. I don't know which resource we're looking at there. Okay, so we'll have to initialize the resources anyway. So mine resource 1, etc. Or what we could do, because we need to specify what resource these are, we'll start with an empty vertical box and we'll call that resource container. And in the graph we can in here go so we need to make sure that the HUD passes on the appropriate widget. So we're creating the T sector widget. And we might as well have a sector in this for ease of use. Then when we create the HUD, we can give it the sector, which we have here. And from that, we know now that not in the event pre-construct, but in the event construct, we're going to have that sector. That sector is going to have some resources. And for each of those resources, we want to add a mining task, or a basic task in this case. Just get rid of the pre-construct. Let's move this up. So I don't know if that's done automatically or not, but we'll do it anyway. So over here we used to get all the resources. Yeah, because we pre-created the images, we used to iterate over them like that. But in this case, we don't do that. So we need to get the resource, break its get the resource, break on its type, do some validity checks on it and on the sector. So I think all of that. We'll do. Let's take all of that, put it in a function. This function will be called render resource tasks. So for the sector resources, iterate over them, get the appropriate resource, switch on the name of, or switch on the type, so we get the 3 different types. We must have missed something from the previous one. Oh yeah, we just surface go straight to the set brush. Yeah, so we're not setting the brush in this case, we're just passing it straight out into that. Yep, that's what we want. Integrating that widget. But we only want to create that widget if it's a surface, if it's an open pit and we're above 100 BC, or if it's a deep mine and we have a mine. So we're not seeing any of the resources. So we've got some errors. Let's see what those are. So we don't have a sector in some cases, which is true. Although that's not true how this should be working now. So I just need to check that this widget is being created in the way that we expect it to be. I think we do. Not sure there's a scenario in which that will be invalid, but it looks like there must be, because of the error I'm getting in the console. Okay, so that's a bit better. We're not getting any errors anymore, but we're not getting our resources. So we have a sector. Have some resources, though it doesn't seem to be able to tell me what. But so we have a resource, we have wood. Wood was one of the resources that we hard coded it to have. I see the issue. We create the widget, we just don't put it anywhere. Forgot to add it to the child, to the vertical box even. Again, within the game, resources can be added and removed dynamically during the course of the game, but we don't seem to be showing all the ones that I'd expect. We only seem to be showing the first one. I don't know whether that's got something to do with the fact that the vertical box wasn't working properly or not. So we just put a breakpoint in here. We get the first resource. Yeah, so we don't get another. So if we build the mine, yeah, oh, there we go. Let's get that done. Move off. Yeah, so we moved off and on. We can see some more resources, but don't really know. The scroll box doesn't seem to be working properly because it's all blurry. It's not blurry, is it? It's probably one widget over the top of another. Yeah, okay, I see what happens there. When we go to the previous sector from a sector, we're actually creating lots of copies of the widget on top of each other. We're not checking. We're calling the function to say we've changed sectors even though we haven't actually changed sectors. Okay, let's just try and ignore that for now. It's not going to be massively relevant. What we want to deal with instead is getting the miners done and trying to get some resources. Actually means the basic task is wrong for this particular set, isn't it? Let's go back. So it's our basic task. Duplicate. Mining task. So the mining task is special in the fact that we don't have time associated with it. did not work well. We actually only have a amount of people, not that, and the amount of resources. Text box is so for the resource gathering, we just simply have the resource, the amount of people, and how many we have. Yeah, so all we're missing from this is the little kind of man icon above the text here, and some of the other bits and pieces that kind of would make it look more like that one is. Yeah, I think we have the sprite for the gathering, yeah. Gathering resource. Mined resource. Yeah, so we'll put that into. So now we can set that image, because this is specifically for mining, we can set that image to the, we'll just call it the method, and that's quantity. So we also need, we take the name, we take the sprite, we're also going to need to have the method. Just try and get these in the right order. There you go. So we just want to be able to set the sprite for each of the methods. Methods we have defined over here. So rather than creating a variable to store these 3 sprites and picking it, I've just gone and created 3 brushes from the sprites. Don't know what I've called that final image. So that's one of the ones we want. That's one open pit. So now in the main widget, in the render resource task, rather than creating a basic task, we actually want to create a mining task. We need to pass through that method as well, which in this case we've called type. That should give us a blank image in that case. If we create the mine, I think I need to make the mine quicker. And then go off and on again. That's not working. Mining task. Oh, sorry, I used name, not method. There we go. So now we get the little hand. We'll have the other things. I'm just going to make the mine a bit quicker. That's in the begin job method, which is handled from our sector widgets on mouse button. Yeah, so we set 300. We'll just do 10. There we go. And if we go on and off, we see the other materials. We don't have a deep mining one, but that's okay. So now we need to be able to add people to it. For the button, add a click, and deallocate, reduce and increase. We don't need the start button in this case, so we don't actually need to tie up anything to the image like we had last time. And we're going to have another set of, I guess, another controller probably within the, or another component within the sector. Is it the sector? Because the sector is the one that's going to know about what resources are available, but it's the castle or the mine, well, the castle that's going to mine it or collect them and store them. to stop that happening. So yeah, the sector has the resources. And the sector also needs to know the quantity of the resources, but I think if we had so the sector itself needs to know which resources are available and which resources are mined and how much of each resource remains. But we also need to make sure that the clients know which resources are available at any given time. So what we can do is have the available resources is basically what the UI will use to show basically the mining task that we have now. But that will be empty by default. Now the resources, the available resources are replicated on initial, so we actually want them to replicate all the time, probably just to the owner. And the resources, so if we give that a category of resources, that can go in the resources category too. The resources is actually going to be a map between a resource and a quantity. As I say, maps can't be replicated, so this information can't leave the server. That's okay, because only the server really needs to know what's how many resources are available. All the clients just need to know which resources are available to them. So we're just going to pre-populate it with a couple of resources. I think we want one from each section, really. That's it. Resources. Yeah, so Moonlight should have been an open pit too, so we'll stick with Moonlight. I think that's what we had before, and it wasn't quite displaying correctly, but we can fix that once we get there. And we're going to start out with 100 of each. So we need to make sure that, I think maybe the castle had available resources. Maybe that's where we should have it actually. So another awkwardness is we need to keep a map of resource quantities on the castle as well for the available resources that the the player and the castle can use. Which one we did for this one. Active component. Yeah, I don't really want to put it on that there. I think the resource gathering stuff. We'll call it mining component. So we've got this mining component now. Want to make sure the data is replicated. And basically in here, when it begins, what we can do is go over to our where was it? Widget here. That one. There. So at the moment this is doing the logic of what should or shouldn't be shown. But we want to take that. Actually, we just want to take all of that as a copy. And then remove the logic part. Because with the way that we're changing it now is that the sector won't, or the UI won't even know about the existence of resources which the user can't mine. And that's good and works more aligned with how the game works, because you don't ever know what resources a sector has until they're available to you. Now in the mining component, at the beginning we want to iterate over all of the sector's resources. So we need to get parent. How did we do it in the construction component? Thought it was parent. Hello, Xantium. I think is that how you would pronounce it? Thanks for stopping by. Just trying to figure out how we can get the castle from inside this component, because we didn't in the construction one. We seem to have avoided it but it's not something. Yeah, so it's actually just the owner. The owner of this component is the castle in this case. So from the castle, we need to get the sector. And from the sector, we can get the available resources. We can also get not that one. Just the resources. So there are two things we need. Because we're going to, within this component, can we not check if we have authority in the component? I think we just have to check the authority on the parent. Which is fine. So really, if we don't have any authority, if this component is on a client, we don't want to set up anything. But this obviously is actually kind of generic. This will be the take that and that, put that into a function. So this will be update available resources. Doesn't look like there's a predefined macro for map. Yeah, so iterating over the map isn't quite straightforward because it doesn't look like they have anything in place for that. So where's my macro library? Just looking for that one. For each item loop. So just make a quick function for a map. So from our map, it needs to be a map. From our map, get all of our keys. Use the normal for loop to iterate over the keys for each item. So yeah, this is a bit too soon. This is just going to be our key here. So from the map we want to find, given our key, the key goes out, item goes out. We know that it should never fail because we've just looped over it. Execution goes out and completion goes out. It seems a bit simple, but let's just see if that works. So in this case we want to utilities map for each item loop, is what we've called it. For each can't seem to access my macros. The component, castle. Keep going up until Yeah, so we can access the check authority, which is in our macro. See if there's some saving issue here. Yeah, the macro is here. Can't do it in there for some reason. Ah, okay, yeah, so I didn't realise, but I guess this macro library is based on actors. So it's a macro library for actor, yeah, parent class actor. So if we create a new blueprint macro library for actor component, component macros, library, so time lucky. Somewhat a bit annoying because we don't really want them to be associated with anything. Global macro library. This function here is not really related to anything other than just doing something. Actually, that's not the one we wanted. Let's do the one we actually wanted. Start with this one. Key and completed. So element, key, and completed, and executing. So that should be map. And this will be map element, map key, now we should be able to do for each item loop. There we go. Pass in our map. So our element is giving us a name. Our key is giving us a name. It's not actually what we want. So why does this not work? So pass in our map. Let's just I take that out here. It gives us an array of names. We didn't tie up the find, did we? That needs to go to there. Let's try again. Named wildcards. That's still not quite what we want. Because what this actually gives us out was an integer, so this macro isn't doing right. Should be an integer. So it's saying the key in that case is integer by returning it. That's not true. Yeah, it just doesn't seem to work out properly for our macro. Because it's meant to be name integer. So that's obviously what it should be. What we're trying to get out of it. See if that works better. So it's kind of, it's not 100% defined, but it's mostly defined. For each item loop. Okay, it seems to accept that a bit better. It doesn't seem to do the map very well, but it does at least allow us to say element is an integer. So the integer tells us how many there are. If there aren't any of them, if there aren't any of them, we won't actually have to need to do anything. So if the integer is greater than or equal to, just greater than 0, then we want to get the resource from the table, do the logic that we had before effectively to determine whether it's available. Actually, we don't need that or that. Yeah, so I think that's actually fairly safe because it's a bit cleaner. We know that we're going to only have a mine if we're greater than that anyway, so if either of these two are true, we want to show it. That needs to be connected to something. Dissect widget, so it's this one. That came from the epoch as of the sector. Such a long route. And basically then if it's an open pit or it's a deep mine, we can do these checks, one or the other. And if it's a surface, we just need to go straight through to what we do when we can show it. So basically, if all of that is true, then we need to just add it. And that means we can take that from there and put it here instead. So we add it to that array if it's good, if it's available to the player on this sector, and that's pretty much it. That was a bit awkward at times. So the mining component should, I don't think I needed that. When the begin play, it should update the available resources, and it kind of updates them on the sector. It's not particularly great that it's kind of going a bit backwards in that case, but it's updating it on the sector nonetheless. So we'll make that replicated to the owner, and then we'll go into the sector widget. Now before it was updating the resources every tick, but now it's doing it within here. It does get the available resources, so that should be fine. Let's see where we are with that then. So I would have expected to see the wood resource from the start. Yeah, we're not getting any resources at all. Okay, so it basically just skipped out the entire loop function. Mining component on the castle. Okay, server says there's no resources. Can this be an actual game? Hello, dear leader. Yes, this will hopefully be an actual game. It's currently an old game, a game Mega-lo-Mania is like 1990s, so it is actually a game, but I am trying to kind of recreate it in Unreal Engine. So yeah, it hopefully will be an actual game in due course. It's taking time to kind of get through it, but I think it's the same for every game really. So we're not got any resources. Why is that? The resources should be set basically straight from the start anyway. So when the castle is created and the mining component is created, oops, didn't mean to resume, skipped everything. Step over. So the castle reference is set. Does the castle actually have a reference to the sector? The castle doesn't. Does the building? Building. Yeah, so the building does, but when does it set it? When it's attached to the sector. So that means it's not going to be available straight away. I mean, maybe the mining component shouldn't be determining what's available anyway. I'll move it into the sector, which does make a little bit more sense anyway, because it's on the sector that all this is happening. So we just may not have a castle. So we don't need to do that. So we've said that if the value is greater than 0, then it's good, but also there needs to be a castle for there to be resources. So we can simply check both before we continue. And now we know there is a castle. Don't need obviously the sector here. The castle. So we'll need the epoch, which is on the sector anyway. Castle reference. Nope. Just the mine reference. So the rest of the logic should be the same, just available resources here, and have to make sure that we're, well, I remember we're not adding to the available resources all the time. So the available resources, we need to clear that right at the beginning. So that should be better in that case. The mining component shouldn't actually be doing any of that anyway. So it's just the kind of the right thing, just in the wrong place. And now our widget should be fine actually. I shouldn't need to change that. So it's not seeing any resources still. We need to go to the sector. So the sector needs to call that. So the sector can call it on construct building, on construction complete. See if building the mine triggers it to do anything. Yes, so that did help. With the mine we can see the two things that we need for the mine, but we can't see the thing that we don't need for the mine, which is a bit weird. That may be why it wasn't working. That was in the sector, take available resources. Yeah, so the castle isn't considered a building at the moment. It's kind of just, it clearly doesn't go through the same function. But now we've come into here, clear it, we iterate over it. We've got a castle and we've got a bigger quantity than 0. So we get it from the data table. Surface isn't tied up. So we just basically need to make sure that's called all the time for anything from the surface. So again, because the function isn't called when the castle is built, it's not going to update immediately. I have to fix that. And it's not updated when the UI is not updated when it changes, but if we move on and off we can now eventually see what we intend to see. Yeah, so it's better. I was hoping to actually get some of the resource gathering process done, but everything takes a little bit longer. We've at least got to the point where the right resources are available for the right reasons, and I'm going to stop for the day. Hopefully we'll be back tomorrow and pick up from where we left off, so it's not quite so many days between each go, but it's somewhat unavoidable this time. But yeah, so hopefully next time we'll be able to actually get some resources being collected, or the basic principle of it. And we'll do that tomorrow. So thanks for stopping by and watching. If you're not already following or whatever on whichever platform you're watching on, then please do. And yeah, so that's all for now. Thanks very much.